Hydrogen has actually been with us since our last universal common ancestor, which all life on the planet sprung from. That last universal common ancestor actually consumed hydrogen as its fuel source. And then eukaryotes, which became our first mitochondria, they formed from a symbiotic relationship between two organelle, one of which expelled hydrogen as the waste product. So hydrogen's been with us since a couple steps before mitochondria existed.
Today we're discussing a topic that's been making headlines, hydrogen water. But before we get into the details, let me ask you this. Have you ever considered whether the water you drink could do more than just keep you hydrated? What if it could actually help boost your energy, support recovery, and enhance your overall health? We're excited to have Alex Tarnava with us, a trailblazer in hydrogen therapy and the mastermind behind patented hydrogen tablets. With years of groundbreaking research and innovation, Alex is here to share how hydrogen water can be a powerful ally in reducing unwanted inflammation and enhancing your well-being. Whether you're a wellness enthusiast or just curious about what hydrogen water can do for you, stay tuned as we explore how this simple change could make a big difference in your daily life. Hey Alex, good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Someone hearing about hydrogen water, and we see it kind of everywhere we go lately, how does it differentiate from just regular water for the layperson?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a lot of people get confused because water is obviously H2O, and they're like, doesn't water already have hydrogen? But hydrogen water is basically water with hydrogen gas dissolved. So think of sparkling water, right? That's CO2 dissolved in water. That gives that effect. It doesn't change the compound of water, right? It's H2O with CO2 as a solution. So this is H2O with H2 as a solution. And the reason that we'd add hydrogen gas dissolved in the water and we can't just get it from the water itself is because our bodies can't break down the molecule of H2O. Right? And when a compound changes, how it affects its surroundings changes. Like think of table salt, sodium chloride, right? Well, chlorine gas is poisonous, and sodium metal is highly explosive and dangerous. Like it burns at thousands of degrees. You drop it in water, it explodes. Shrapnel that might like seriously harm or injure you. But you put it together, and it's table salt that we put in our food. So H2O doesn't have the same properties as H2. And hydrogen water, delivering it in water, it's basically just a delivery method to get the H2 not just into our bodies, but into our internal organs in our gut, where it interacts with various bacteria and plays a role.
Okay, so because we see a lot all throughout the biohacking community, wellness communities, what do you think is driving this trend of late?
There's a couple things going for it. As with anything, popularity creates popularity, right? The more popular something becomes, the more people get interested in it and want to learn. Think of like you go to a restaurant that has a long line or a bar that has a long line, and you're like, "What's this all about? I want to join this because other people." And so then restaurants will figure out, "Oh, let's create a long line." Clubs won't let anyone in back in the day. When you go to the bar, there's a 2-hour lineup, and you get in, and it's only 20% full. Right? Because they're purposefully creating that. So popularity creates popularity. So the more influencers and biohackers and everything talking about hydrogen, the more people become interested in the subject. But with hydrogen, opposed to say a restaurant or a bar pulling a scam and just creating popularity by popularity, is there's actually science to back it up. So there's over 2,000 publications to date on the health benefits of molecular hydrogen. There's 160 or 170 clinical trials showing the health benefits of hydrogen. We're starting to understand the evolutionary reason of why getting exogenous hydrogen therapy is having such a profound impact. But to date, it's shown to be beneficial for close to 180 different disease and exercise-induced models and such, and metabolic models across every organ in the mammalian body, right? So it has these wide-reaching impacts, and a lot of these impacts are experiential. So a lot of people talking about hydrogen, maybe they think it's bullshit, and then they start taking it from a good source, because the source of hydrogen water can vary in concentration by 500 times, 1,000 times. It can be dramatic, right? But a lot of the people who start on a really good source notice the benefits, right? And when you notice some experiential benefits and then that's backed up by science, that is what will make you really passionate about something.
Right. And so these benefits, I've read inflammation, maybe reducing of inflammation. What are some other benefits that people can experience, or like you're saying, the experiential side, to enhance wellness?
So hydrogen, how you can think of it is sort of like a supervisor within your cell. So rather than lower inflammation, which wouldn't always be a good thing, by the way,
You
inflammation
need
is
some,
part of
yeah.
it's part of our immune system. It's how we respond to stress. For instance, exercise releases inflammation, and the amount it releases, it's in its myokine role, which actually leads to positive health outcomes and regulating the inflammatory response. Hydrogen works in a very similar way. It works sort of like a hormetic stress, like exercise or cold exposure or heat exposure, but it's not a perfect example. But it has sort of like a mitohormetic effect. And through this mitohormetic effect, it regulates our inflammatory response, which is actually very useful in conjunction with other therapies like exercise. Because hydrogen, in conjunction with exercise, will actually spike the inflammatory response during exercise higher than exercise alone and recover to homeostasis faster than exercise alone. So it's like you worked out harder and recovered quicker. In addition, hydrogen does this for a lot of the other important aspects of our physiology, like redox status within the cell. So a lot of people think, oh, I need a lot of antioxidants, right? And it's because in most disease models, we see high levels of oxidative stress, right? But in the research, if we look at it, high dose antioxidant therapy doesn't actually work. In fact, high dose long term antioxidant therapy leads to higher all cause mortality, higher rates of various diseases, interferes with treatments such as cancer treatments. So we know high dose long term antioxidant therapy is actually a negative, not a positive, because it can put you into reductive stress, which is just as harmful as oxidative stress, right? Same kind of idea that if like mega dose on a lot of vitamins and minerals, the same side effects as if you were deficient happen, right? Because everything in our body is about harmony. So hydrogen, it actually regulates the production of various like our endogenous antioxidants like glutathione, catalase, superoxide dismutase. So we're producing the right amount, and it's regulating also some of our beneficial stressors like nitric oxide and hydrogen peroxide. So in this way, hydrogen is driving towards a redox homeostasis. It does the same thing with autophagy, which is a lot of the rage in biohacking and longevity. So usually you want autophagy activated, but not all the time. And in most studies, hydrogen has shown to activate autophagy, but in some key models, like after drowning resuscitation, after heart failure, hydrogen has actually inhibited autophagy for a beneficial response where you don't want it at all. So hydrogen, again, you can think of it kind of like this supervisor that's going in and turning the dials to what they should be on how your body needs at that
Got
moment.
So would there be people that would gain more from hydrogen water, or gain the most, if that's even like a groups or lifestyles or age range, when it comes to that sort of idea of, okay, I want to try, I want to try this, but I don't really know. Should I do it before a workout? Should I,
So
how
for
would that?
exercise, definitely before a workout is best, right? Because you want the hydrogen in your system to react to that stress of exercise. Now, the people who are going to respond best are typically ones who are more sick or dealing with an acute stress of some sort. And the reason it works so well in some people and maybe others don't notice might come down to lifestyle and your microbiome. So we evolved to produce tremendous amounts of hydrogen gas by fermenting fiber, right? Hydrogen has actually been with us since our last universal common ancestor, which all life on the planet sprung from. That last universal common ancestor actually consumed hydrogen as its fuel source. And then eukaryotes, which became our first mitochondria, they formed from a symbiotic relationship between two organelle, one of which expelled hydrogen as the waste product. So hydrogen's been with us since a couple steps before mitochondria existed. We evolved to produce this high amount, but we're not actually getting it anymore because the way we're producing hydrogen gas is by fermenting fiber. Throughout human evolution, we consumed 100 to 150 grams of dietary fiber per day. Now, the average person in the world consumes 10 to 15, but the average person on a standard American diet consumes 1 to 3 grams of dietary fiber a day. So you're getting a fraction, of the fuel to create hydrogen gas is what we evolved to anticipate. And of course, because bacteria are living things, if you don't feed them, they die. So research is showing that a large percent of people, once they hit middle age, metabolically impaired, maybe a bit overweight or something, lack the bacteria to make hydrogen. You give them a polysaccharide or a undigestible carbohydrate, and they produce methane instead. Now, this is very important because we know that methane rising in the breath is correlated with basically every disease. We know that as we age, breath methane rises and breath hydrogen drops. And we also know that in studies of centenarians, such as in Okinawa, these people who are over 100 have higher breath hydrogen than the average young person, right? So what this all means is because of lifestyle and because most people don't actually look to improve their health until they're actually starting to get a little bit sick or a little bit older in life, by then it's often too late. So the only way that you can get hydrogen back into your cells is by taking it exogenously, like something like hydrogen water or hydrogen inhalation at the right dose, various methods. You can no longer get it by just adding more fiber to your diet.
So people, I guess, would those be considered blue zones, like you're saying, like in Japan and others?
Yeah, so the research where they measured, basically breath gases was done in Okinawa, but they found that the centenarians, which is Okinawa is one of the blue zones, had higher breath hydrogen than the average young person, right? So their lifestyle had meant their diet and lifestyle meant that they continued to produce high amounts of hydrogen gas well, you know, into old age past 100 years. And this is corroborated by some research that's been done on mice, in which we've shown to dramatically extend health span in mice with hydrogen, drinking hydrogen water. So not lifespan, not maximal lifespan, but average health span. So if you look at the wild type mice control group, they die, they're scattered, but like a human between 60 to 100 years old. Some lived long, some died young. You look at the hydrogen group, and all of them are clustered at the top, as if they all lived to around 100 to the maximal lifespan of mice, and none of them developed any neurological issues.
So, okay, you touched on a lot of stuff, which is very, very fascinating. First, I wanted to ask you, like, oxidative stress, right? You said it could help, like, in simple terms for someone who might be like, okay, what is my oxidative stress and how is this hydrogen water? Do you mind breaking that down?
Yeah, so oxidative stress, in some terms, some oxidative stress will be free radicals, but not all of them. And some free radicals aren't oxidative but nitrosative. But in short, we want this harmony between, reactivity like oxidation and nitrosative stresses and reduction, right? We want the right amount and we want to get rid of the bad guys, right? Like, that there's certain oxidative and nitrosative stresses that just aren't good, right? But like the hydroxyl radical and peroxynitrite. So you want to get rid of those without harming the beneficial stressors, the weaker stressors like hydrogen peroxide and nitric oxide. I mean, we know with nitric oxide, it plays so many critical roles in our body with vasodilation and such. So you don't want to take too many reductive molecules because then that wipes out these beneficial stressors. And that's where hydrogen regulating the production of both these beneficial reactive molecules and our antioxidants, right, our reduction molecules. That's why it's so critically important, because it's driving towards this harmony, this homeostasis, so that both are playing their role. We have the right amount of antioxidants to wipe out the bad guys, and the good guys aren't harmed.
Got it. Okay. Are there, I don't know, groups, age range, whatever it might be, that would not benefit from hydrogenated water?
If you're young and super healthy,
Mm-hmm.
then there's no need to take it every day. But maybe if you have an acute stress, like maybe if you hurt yourself playing a sport, or you got a really bad sleep, or if say you're a super healthy person, in your 20s, right? You went out for a really late night, and indulged a bit, then you're dealing with an extreme stress, and you should take hydrogen to help mitigate that stress and help you respond better to that acute stress. Same thing if you're a high level athlete. Maybe you're very healthy. Exercise is a big stress. You want to use hydrogen to help regulate your response to that stress. Every person, the protocol is going to be a little bit different depending. If you're dealing with chronic issues, like we've reversed things like metabolic syndrome, we've shown to dramatically improve phenotypic biomarkers associated with aging, and also functional tests associated with aging in the elderly. For people like that, if you have metabolic issues, if you're older, you want to take hydrogen every day, right? Because you're probably deficient in it, and you need to really ramp up and get the right dose. If you're a high level athlete, you probably want to be taking hydrogen almost every day, because you're dealing with a consistent barrage of stress from your training protocol. If you were a generally healthy younger person, just take it on days you aren't feeling great. Had a bad night's sleep, indulge, jet lag, maybe take it intermittently once every few days. But, like say you're eating 60, 80 grams of fiber a day, you're got a perfect diet, you exercise but not too much, there's no need to take it every day. You just want to dose it intermittently. And you'll actually get a better response doing that too.
Is there a way to find out, like, okay, I don't get enough in my system? Like, how would someone sort of test if there's a test for that?
I mean, a lot of clinics don't have, breath hydrogen meters at this
Okay.
point. Most of the research teams do that are doing research on hydrogen. A lot of them believe sometime in the next 10 years or so, maybe 20, like your GP is going to have a breath analysis meter to measure your levels of hydrogen and your levels of methane, as a predictive model to see what's going on, but we're a ways from that.
Yeah.
Probably the reason most of these breath meters, the handheld ones, are at least a few $1,000s. So unless you're really into the science on the gases we're creating through our microbiome, you're not going to be adding that to your practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. For someone that really doesn't understand, how will these hydrogen, and for you, I want to get into your method of delivery with hydrogen tablets, but how would this sort of regulate someone's microbiome?
So, I mean, hydrogen plays a big role in our microbiome. There's a lot of bacteria that consume it as a fuel source. There's a lot that produce it, like the first single cell organism that is our last universal common ancestor consumed it as a fuel source. Hydrogen plays a big role here, and I'm not sure we know the exact mechanisms yet, but we know that by bringing in molecular hydrogen exogenously, it can actually start changing our microbiome and improving it, right, over time. And actually, this is one of the unique reasons why you drink hydrogen water instead of hydrogen inhalation. Now, hydrogen inhalation, you actually get a much bigger dose of hydrogen. You get more to your lungs, obviously. It goes into your skeletal tissue, your muscles, at a little higher rate, but it doesn't get into your gut. So by drinking hydrogen water, that's why I was saying it's basically just a administration method, a delivery method to get the hydrogen gas into your stomach, into your intestines, and into your internal organs. So our dynamics pharmacokinetic research will show that drinking the hydrogen water is saturating various organs better, like your liver, your kidney, getting to these places, even your heart better. So there's a time and a place for when you want hydrogen inhalation, when you might want hydrogen water drinking, when you might want to bathe in hydrogen water. But for the microbiome, it's definitely drinking hydrogen water.
Delivery methods. We do see these, right, all over online. The bottles, you push the button, it lights up, and you see the bubbles. You personally have, patented these open cup hydrogen tablets. How do these sort of delivery methods? Again, you said inhalation. How do they all work, and how do they break down for someone that's like, okay, I want to do it, I just don't know where to start?
Basically, hydrogen is like any other molecule. It works on a dose and concentration dependent manner, right? Nobody would expect if you break an Advil into 100 pieces, that 1/100th of an Advil would work the same as taking one Advil, right? That's just crazy talk. But a lot of these markers will say, oh, because hydrogen water has these benefits, our bottle that makes a little bit of hydrogen has these benefits. And that's just not true. They can't prove it. And in fact, the research that we have demonstrates that it doesn't. So to date, all the research is showing that you need a certain amount of hydrogen for the minimum, you know, therapeutic physiological response, right? But then more is typically better. In many, many models, we need vastly more amounts of hydrogen to see beneficial outcomes, and in no models has a lower amount worked, right? So we've been scaling up the dose more and more. Now, with the tablets, we're getting over 12 parts per million in 500 milliliters of water, right? So that's about 6 milligrams of hydrogen, a little over 6 milligrams of hydrogen. The best bottles in the market, advertise about 5 parts per million in 250 milliliters. So that's only 1.25 milligrams of hydrogen. So even when they're brand new, the tablet is giving you a 5 times greater dose than this bottle. Now, what makes matters worse is these bottles, how they're creating the hydrogen water, how they're retaining it, how they're getting to the 5 ppm is using something called Henry's Law, right? So Henry's Law talks about how when you increase the pressure in a system, it can, saturate more water or more of a gas into a solution. So the saturation point of hydrogen at SATP is only 1.6 parts per million. And you need to do something to get past 1.6. They're using time and pressure. Time and pressure obviously increases the pressure on that bottle. And the gaskets they're using typically can only handle about 40 psi of pressure, but to get to the 5 ppm, they're getting 50, 60 psi of pressure. So often these bottles are breaking on the very first use, but almost always it seems within a month or so. And when you test these bottles sometimes after a week or after a month, they're getting less than 1 parts per million because they're not holding the pressure and forcing the gas into solution. They're getting 0.6, 0.7 parts per million. Now you're only getting 0.15 milligrams of hydrogen, meaning that the single tablet is a 40 times higher dose, right, than this. With the tablet, the way we're getting it is by creating very, very small nanobubbles. So basically, the smaller you go, if you go below 5 microns in size, whether it's a gas bubble or a particle, and whether it's in an aqueous solution or the air, it behaves differently. This is why during the pandemic, they're like, oh, the COVID can travel 40, 50, 100 feet, stay in the air for hours or days, and that's because the particle size was small, right? So it resists floating away and it resists settling. It just moves at this random pace. And when you look at the open cup tablets under a microscope, you see the same thing. These eddy currents are forming, right? And they're going in all these different directions. And that's why the water ends up looking kind of like skimmed milk. It just turns white. Those are all this cloud of gas, and they're all moving in random directions. They're not sinking and they're not dissipating out. And they won't dissipate out until they coalesce past 5 microns. And we're making nanobubbles in the 10 to 30 nanometer in range. And that's what makes it relatively stable enough, so much so that you can drink it down and get that super high concentration and dose.
So it's a more potent delivery? More of a
Yeah, we're getting
layman's term?
7.5, 8 times the amount that you could typically get by just
Okay.
saturating it in water. So we're fully saturating the water, and then we're delivering this additional cloud of nanobubbles.
Okay, because we also see sometimes you go to the grocery store, you see the plastic. Well, we could go down the whole of like plastic bottles, but we see it already right
They're
in the
ready to
solution.
drink. Yeah. So those pouches from Japan, the big problem with them, they're using aluminum, which can retain hydrogen, but they're using a plastic cap, right? And usually
Hmm.
it's just a thin little foil seal. So typically when you test those, by the time they land in the US, they're at like zero point 0.4, zero point 0.5 parts per million and like 200 milliliters. It's like 1/10 the minimum
Why
dose
bother?
that is
Yeah.
shown, to have any physiological effect. Yeah, it's a why bother, and they're $4 or $5,
Yeah.
and you need to drink 10 of them within 5 minutes, right, to get to the minimum dose that's ever shown to have a physiological effect. It's madness. Now, not in the U.S., but overseas, I use the tablets to make ready to drink hydrogen water in cans for some companies, and we can get up to about 5 parts per million, and hopefully soon they'll hit the market in the US with some of these brands. But that is sufficient for some models like exercise to see a good effect.
How it's like, so what led you to sort of like come up with this idea? Was it,
Necessity?
yeah?
Yeah. Long story short, I got really sick. I was in the prime of my health. I was 29 at the time. I was training 4 to 6 hours a day between CrossFit and martial arts. I had a business that was quite profitable that I didn't actually have to work at that much. 3 weeks of the 4 of the month, I'd be at home working an hour or two a day. So I was training as if I was a pro athlete, even though I wasn't, just as a hobby. Then I'd be on the road for a week a month going and, visiting customers and such. I got hit with a mystery virus or something that just absolutely wrecked my health. Basically sudden onset narcolepsy. I'd fall asleep if I sat down or stopped doing things for a minute or so. I was sleeping 16 to 18 hours a day. I had central nervous system fatigue, so I couldn't jump an inch off the ground or do any explosive movement, but my strength hadn't gone down. It was really bizarre and scary. And my C reactive proteins were about 100 times abnormal, right? So I was in deep trouble. And that lasted a couple months. And when the dust settled, I had polyarthritis. I developed osteoarthritis in 11 joints, and couldn't put on a sock, couldn't put on a jacket because of my shoulder and my hip, and I got put on high dose naproxen, like 1,000 milligrams of naproxen a day. So call it like super Aleve, like taking 5 Aleve at once, like every time, right? Which I just knew wasn't a long term solution. So I started looking, this 4 to 6 hours a day that I had spent exercising, I just spent reading PubMed, right? Looking for anything and everything that could regulate the inflammatory system. And I had a lot of different things that I was trying. I was going to cryosaunas, I was trying tons of different supplements, was doing all these sorts of different therapies, modalities, supplements. And I bought a hydrogen water machine for like 5 grand, like an ionizer, right,
Mm.
to make it. And I was just on my merry way. And about 9 months later, I fainted in the gym a few times. The naproxen had given me multiple ulcers. I wasn't processing my food properly. So I had to stop the naproxen. My joints froze within a few days, which made me realize that none of these biohacks I was using were properly working for me. And the fact that my inflammation had stayed so high, it's really interesting because I've gotten tons of blood tests. Every doctor I talk to thinks that I have an autoimmune of some sort, but every autoimmune I get tested for is undetectable, not there. That could be all the therapies I'm using are keeping everything at bay, in recession. So it's hard to say exactly, but anyways, my body went haywire when I stopped the naproxen, and I realized nothing was working. I went back to the drawing board, read more studies, saw a few more on hydrogen, which pissed me off because I had this $5,000 machine. But it just dawned on me, how do I know that there's hydrogen being made in this machine? And what's the proper dose? So I started buying the full studies so I could read the materials and methods and realized that not a single one of them was using a machine like what I'd bought. So then I found a reagent that could test for hydrogen gas via redox hydration. And I tested the machine and there was no detectable H2. I had to actually more than triple the input to detect a single drop. So it was like 0.03 parts per million. Impossibly low. So that gave me a little bit of hope, and I started experimenting on making hydrogen gas myself. I figured it out within a couple weeks and was getting about 3 parts per million and drinking several liters a day, and all of my joints loosened, and I started feeling better, and my inflammation went way down. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I'm like, okay, I got to keep doing this, but I knew what I was doing wasn't, again, a long-term solution because I was bringing in the elemental magnesium, the metal magnesium I needed from Eastern Europe and China because in the US, and you can't get it in Canada, but in the US, it's controlled by the DoD and the State Department, and you have to go through all these background checks and everything for your end use to get it. Because at the end of the day, elemental magnesium, it burns at like 6,000 degrees. It's the white in fireworks. it's some serious hazardous stuff if you don't know what you're doing with it. When you consume it, there's none left because it all reacts and it just leaves free magnesium ions in the water, which is exactly what your body needs. Right? That's how the hydrogen's getting produced. But I thought to myself, okay, I got to test this magnesium. If I was getting from China, it had way too high levels of heavy metals in it, which concerns me. Sort of the process of getting some from the U.S. was able to, smuggle a small amount of samples in to work with R&D into Canada through a reseller who shouldn't have sold it to me, but that's a whole other story. But I ended up partnering with my founding partner. He's a PhD organic chemist from the pharmaceutical industry. First, he said it was the worst pseudoscience he'd ever heard in his life. Gave me all the reasons why it wouldn't have a physiological effect, and even if it did, why you wouldn't dissolve it in water, why you should inhale it. And I was up to date with the research at the time enough to rebut every question with citations and publications. Well, color me shocked. I'm still skeptical, but I'll take a look at what you're doing. And just I kept firing off a new study a day as he was tweaking my formulation and looking at it for me. And serendipitously, I sent him one on a certain disease model that he was currently designing small molecules for his pharma company, and called me for lunch and said, listen, like, I just had to trust the findings of the other studies and look at the methods to make sure that they controlled it properly. But on this study, like, I'm a subject matter expert, and unless this is fraud, this stuff works. He said, have you considered commercializing this and not just using it as a do-it-yourself project, to be safe? And that's when we started. It took about a year of time, thousands of iterative adjustments in the formulation, 15 failed scale-up attempts, but we finally got our first production-ready tablet. We have thousands more iterative adjustments since then to get to where we're at. It was not easy. We quickly realized that making 20 in a mortar and pestle was infinitely easier than making millions of them at high speed, worrying about the safety, getting it to react consistently in the same way every time.
Wow. I mean, that's quite a story. You took it out of a necessity for your own health. When you look back, were there things that you were reading? Like you said, you were jumping on a bunch of PubMed, articles and studies and things like that. Was there anything that you went to take tests that would even like register your hydrogen levels anywhere? Was there any doctor you went to? Nothing.
No.
Okay.
It was completely unheard of then.
Yeah.
Like I'd say when I started, maybe 100, maybe 1,000 people had heard of hydrogen water. And of those people, they were either from Japan or, like an integrative practitioner going to like A4M or something like that. Nobody, the average person, when I'm telling them what I did, they look at me with extreme skepticism. That's crazy. What are you doing? And all that thing. Now I'd say probably close to 4 to 5 people I talk to have heard of hydrogen water. Now they don't know much about it. They don't know if it's actually has science, if it's good for you, or dose. They know nothing about it. But they're like, yeah, I've heard something about that. So it's been a monumental shift in public awareness. We've hit this critical mass of where most people have heard that it's a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They maybe don't take it, they don't know much about it, but they know it exists. And the next critical mass will come when people realize it's good for you. And I don't think the average consumer is ever going to know why it's good for them. And that's the same for a lot of things. Like most people don't know why exercise is good for you, right? But you know it's good for you, so you do it. And that's going to come, that day will come with hydrogen, to where the average person just knows it's good for you and they need to incorporate it.
Well, you mentioned skepticism even with, your business partner. What do you think, like, the biggest challenges you face when you're sort of educating people? And not that everyone's skeptical, like they just don't know why they need it or that is good for you. Like what is that sort of challenge you think is the biggest one you come across?
Yeah, I'd say the why you need it. Like when you explain hydrogen and how it works, unless someone's dealing with a chronic issue or very high level, like a biohacker or like a high level athlete that wants every little advantage, they go, well, I am healthy, I don't need it. That for most people is just not true. They think they're healthy, but they're healthy by our current standards, meaning that they don't have chronic diseases.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. So someone listening, what's a way of the best way? Obviously you're a proponent of the tablets. Is that a once a day thing, or is it sort of depending on, like you said, maybe you're an athlete,
Yeah,
maybe
no,
you're
the situation. Yeah, yeah. Like, if you have a lot of stress, like you're a high level athlete, you're older, you have a metabolic issue, you probably won't take 2 to 4 tablets a day. That's where we're seeing the peak in dosing effect. So we haven't found a plateau in a lot of models. Like, say, in some cell lines for some models, up to full saturation of the cell is still showing a dose dependent response. And it would actually be impossible to fully saturate all of the cells in the body. So we're not even 100 there. We know that it's incredibly safe, so there's no harmful side effects by dosing up, other than you don't want to go too high on magnesium, just because there's a RDA on magnesium. But 2 to 4 tablets a day, if you're dealing with something chronic, if you're a high level athlete, things like that. If you're really young and really healthy, just days that you're dealing with an abnormal stress. That's when you'd want to take hydrogen. We actually have a couple clinical trials in young, healthy participants after acute sleep deprivation. And we showed in the one study to be equivalent to caffeine at raising the attention network test. So caffeine primarily affects alerting, and hydrogen was primarily affecting orienting, right? So a very different experience, but they led to similar test scores improvements. So we did a second, bigger study with more controls. So we had a placebo group, a caffeine placebo group, a hydrogen placebo group, and a hydrogen caffeine group. And we put everyone under a functional MRI to do brain scans. And the hydrogen only group and the hydrogen caffeine group had the vastly more robust responses in brain metabolism, you know, choline to creatine ratios than the caffeine alone group. So that was pretty interesting, and that's one of the reasons I say days you're really tired, had a late night, sleep deprived, jet lagged. That's when you're going to notice the biggest effect from hydrogen if you're an otherwise healthy person.
Yeah, and you mentioned like athletes. That would be something you would take before you start like your training for the day. How about for someone like you said, a younger person that just goes out? Is that something you do before you go out or the next morning?
I do it both, before
Okay.
and after. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that
But
makes sense.
if you're going to do one, do it before. But if you do it after, it can still help you. But best would be before and after.
Okay. What excites you personally about the future of research on hydrogen water and these benefits we keep learning?
I think the future is going to show concurrent hydrogen therapy with other therapies. So to date, with the tablets, we have 17 published clinical trials. We have more clinical trials underway, some of them that are undergoing peer review with good results than we have published. We have a handful of other case reports, like medical case reports on patients. We have a half dozen preclinical trials on mice, and we have much more underway as well. What we're seeing in some of these preclinicals, both published and that we're writing up the reports right now, is synergy between hydrogen and existing therapeutics. So the hydrogen is potentiating the therapeutic response of these approved therapies and reducing the side effects. So that's what excites me the most.
What would be like sort of like a one key takeaway you would want people to remember about hydrogen water and its many benefits and how they should be incorporating that in their lives?
So I'd say think of hydrogen like exercise for your cell, specifically your mitochondria, which makes your energy. So hydrogen's a mitohormetic effector. It aggravates mitochondria, which makes it stronger, right? So it's like exercise for your mitochondria, exercise for your cells. You're making stronger, healthier cells, and that's why you need to do it. Even if you don't understand it, you need it to be making your mitochondria and your cells healthier, just like you need exercise to make your muscles healthier. Just like with exercise, dose and concentration is super important. You wouldn't expect to get big muscles if you're doing a single dumbbell curl once every hour.
Right.
With H2, it's the same way. You want a high stress in a short period of time. So you want the highest concentration you can get slammed back. That stresses out your mitochondria, your cells. They get stronger and work better.
God. Okay. So how about for people that want to like learn more about you, your work, your website, right? They want to get these tablets, right? How can they sort of find more about yourself and connect with you?
So I've got the alextarnava.com, right? I also have a ResearchGate account where people can read the research I'm involved in. So I'm not a full-time researcher, but I publish 15 or 20 papers and always, working on a couple a year anyways. I don't really post much on social media, and what I do is like concerts or UFC fights and stuff like that. But I'll occasionally post, like when I publish a study, I'll post it in my story or something like that. But
Instagram.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I'll put your website, your main website in the
yeah.
link
Yeah, the
for people.
alextarnava.com would be the one for my stuff.
And then from there, you can see the projects tabs and see all the cool things that
Yeah.
Alex is working on. Just, which is like what you brought to the table today. Thank you so much, man. That was great. You're a very smart guy, and I was trying to keep up. So I appreciate you kind of breaking that down for our listeners and to really understand. But great to meet you, and everyone check out alextarnava.com.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. Great meeting you as well.